Welcome to session 2 of our DVA series. This week we'll be unpacking the role of and the impact of the DVA, or the data value architect, for those that are not au fait with the DVA acronym. And today we'll be specifically covering actual experience and the patterns that we keep seeing in organizations. The idea is to show some practical examples of where the DVA managed to drive better impact towards value creation, a believable lived experience, and not just theory or sort of what we've seen, but actually things that we have gone through and that we've experienced. So real things, real experience for the role, no hype. And just the general theme there is most organizations do data but can't prove, protect, or sustain value. Right. So a lot of them deliver data analytics, they deliver actionable insights, but they can't prove, protect, or sustain value from those initiatives or investments. And as per usual, Max will be doing our weekly reality check to ensure that we don't get caught up in hype and that we focus on what's actually happening in practice. So Mags, will you open up with the hook of the week, please?
Yeah, today for me, important part is where we're facing a lot of times organizations that need a lot of analytics, and they want analytics, and then they get analytics and they spend millions on analytics. But then afterwards, they argue for years on what the actual value is of that analytics. What's your opinion about that?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing we've seen. We always talk about that dreaded month 14 where data leader gets appointed, they get a lot of money in investment because there's a lot of hype around things that we need to do. At some stage, we'll cover, topical data management or data leaders, where this month it's AI, agentic AI. Tomorrow it is data governance, and that sort of then becomes the role of the data team. But I think for the context for today, what we want to focus on is really sort of the lived patterns where we've seen investments being made and value not being realized. And what was the reason for that? And how does the role of the DVA change that so that we can actually realize value? So the three lived patterns, or the three patterns that we will typically see within organization, is orphaned analytics. So analytics that's built and not adopted, right? So significant amount of effort that goes in from the technical teams to collect the data, clean the data, validate it, bring it together. And then business places a lot of pressure on the teams to deliver these insights, get me the dashboard, get me the model. And they're convinced that the data will give them the answers, and then it ends up not doing it. And then people just don't use it. I mean, it's the mere fact that we need to build in user metrics. How many people are actually accessing the dashboards into our analytics these days tell us that we have a systemic problem, right? Because if you built it on a clear case for value, people will use it. If you need to bring a stick into the conversation to measure people and if they're actually delivering the value or not, or using it or not, then we've got a bit of a problem. The second lived pattern, obviously, is that the Excel finance reality, right? So numbers don't reconcile, trust erodes. We've got multiple Excel sheets with multiple values on it, multiple sources of truth. This team is pulling data directly from the source system. That team is reusing it from a formal data platform. These guys are getting it out of other means, or maybe embedded analytics into the systems themselves. There's meetings and discussions that needs to happen, decisions that needs to be made, and people don't get to that point because that very first minute when the floor opens and they start showing the numbers, the team start fighting and arguing about it, right? So that real reality of where we're living, where everybody doesn't have access to everything. I mean, as we would have thought in a world where collaboration is a lot better on things like Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and, Google Workspaces, that people will be using the same spreadsheets and collaborating. But people don't, right? Because I make a copy of what you did. I just want to do my own calculation on it.
Yeah.
But then that becomes my version of truth and not your version of truth. And then when we start reporting these things back, we realize things don't come up. So the first pattern is orphaned analytics. The second one is that typical Excel finance reality. And the third one is value attribution. No value attribution, right? So benefits are claimed, not evidenced. I mean, we've worked with many customers before, even current customers, where we think this analytics is going to bring in so much revenue for us or give us cost, or we are going to be able to do things that we've never been able to do before. We can see customer behavior where we couldn't see it before. We can determine what our customers are going to buy, which we couldn't do before. Right? So all these benefits are being claimed, but they're not substantiated. There's no actual evidence for it, right? So again, that definition of done is the fact that I'm giving you analytics doesn't mean analytics has done its job, right? It needs to link back to clear business impact, what value was created, and there needs to be evidence to support those claims that data analytics made a difference, if at all. So that's just to reiterate the three patterns: orphaned analytics, the Excel finance reality, and no value attribution. Now, how do we see this playing out practically in the world of data analytics? I'm going to go through three mini case studies. I think what is important to sort of get your mindset into as we're going through these case studies is see how this translates back to things that you are experiencing on a day-to-day, things that you've seen, things that you see that's coming, or just take awareness of this, right? If you haven't done analytics before or you're very new to this journey, these are the things to look out for, right? And this is also the reason why the role of the DVA is important. So the first situation is your exco requests insights because they need to support key business decisions, and they need to make sure that at an executive level, they know what's happening in the organization, right? So the key theme of value there would be is the boss asked for something and I want to build it for them because I want to score brownie points, right? A lot of the world of data is based on that bartering, right? So where I know I'm not going to get investment from the CFO and the CEO, but if I sort of resolve their issues for them, then maybe I score some brownie points. So when I do ask for something, they're a bit more helpful, and a bit more open to having a conversation of investing in the things that I need to do. So that insight to support that core business decision at an executive level is sort of the situation that we find ourselves in. But then what goes wrong is you then have a lack of trust in the data that gets presented because these numbers don't align to their expectations. Very often you have executives that they know the business really well and they sort of have a gut feel of what it is that they think they need to see, and you show them the number and they're like, can't be, this is not possible, like these numbers are not correct. I don't know what you've done or how you've massaged the data or what criteria you've applied to it, but these numbers are not ready. So what happens is you've put in the time and the investment and the effort to get this high level executive insights ready, and now the trust has been broken, right? So what does a DVA do in this instance, and how does a DVA fix this? So the DVA typically in this environment or in this instance would have come in or had come in, and they focus on data trust and bringing in the business context as to what the numbers actually represent. And this, by doing this, they increase trust in what is seen by ensuring it contextually aligns with what the business expects. If you just bring up a number, and I've been in many of these sessions where you prepare 20 slides, but your second slide has got a graph on it and there's some numbers on it. And you've got an hour session booked, but you never move beyond slide number 2 because people start arguing in the numbers, debating the numbers, getting into the numbers. If you start with business context first to say, this is the world we're finding ourselves in, this is the information that we're capturing in our systems, these are the rules that we have, this is what we include, this is what we exclude. So setting the scene as to what you're about to see. So I'm preparing you, like those disclaimers in the beginning of a movie, to say this might offend sensitive viewers, or this is not for sensitive viewers. You have to get people in the right mindset before you show them the gory reality. Very much the same thing is getting them in the right mindset before exposing that to them so that trust actually comes in. The moment where trust gets broken is if you're showing me data analytics or insights or something without context. So I don't know where the number comes from. I don't have a warm, fuzzy feeling of what it is. And because of that, I don't just lose trust in the data, I lose trust in you because I would have expected you to be able to contextualize what I'm seeing in front of me. Right. So the role of the DVA is coming in. They focus on that data trust and bringing in the business context, and they help get the Exco team or the senior leadership team or whomever that audience is of their dashboards or insights to understand what it is that is in front of them. Now, what has changed in this instance, right, from just delivering the insights and walking away? Well, the first thing is obviously adoption change, right? So now all of a sudden you have leaders that adopt the insights that you're getting out of it, that leads to better decision making. And this is not just simply dismissing the analytics that's presented, but understanding what the data actually means. So this leads to better adoption, faster decision making, and improved measurable value across revenue uplift as well as cost reduction, right? So in this instance, the lost value would have been, or was actually, dashboards were delivered. They didn't trust the dashboards, and because of that, no decisions were made. Now you're giving them context. They acknowledge that the data is about 40% of the way there, but that's enough for them to make sound decisions on it. And the direct impact out of that is they're able to make decisions that's directly increasing revenue, as well as optimizing or reducing cost in certain areas. So that scenario one is where you're delivering stuff for executive levels. They don't trust the information, and you need to establish trust. The DVA is the individual that helps you establish that trust.
Yes.
The second situation is one that if you come from a quantitative background, if you've done data, or what do they call it at some point, advanced data analytics, right? Because data analytics is not cutting it anymore. Like big data and bigger data and exponential data, it's the same thing. It's just the volumes are increasing. We don't have to think new words out for it. But one thing that you would have experienced more than likely in your career, or that you would have seen, is you've built a specific model, a propensity model, so propensity to buy or a next best action or whatever it might be. Now, one of the big ones that we found a couple of times with customers is where there's a request to build a churn model to drive customer retention, right? So we need to know which customers are more than likely going to leave us in the next couple of months. The analytics team says, okay, we understand the brief. We've got our marching orders. Let's get on the system. And they start pulling out the data as much as they can. And they're working with, the counterparts, and they're trying to figure out, what is defined as a customer? What's defined as a product? Are we doing customer churn or product churn, or both, right? So what level of churn are we actually doing? And they spent 6 months just hammering this thing and building it out. And then once they're done, they go back and they say, well, now we need to make this thing happen. And business says, okay, well, make it happen. Now, the data team worked in isolation. So first of all, they didn't take the right data people or the business people with them on this journey. Secondly, is they didn't involve IT in this conversation at all, right? So adoption becomes the challenge, and that's the thing that goes wrong. IT and extended business functions that was required to embed this analytics into core business processes were not involved. And by the time the model got to them, they're already committed to other priorities, right? If you have your plate full and you've got 20 other priorities, and somebody else says, listen, you need to stop what you're doing. We now need to embed and entrench this analytic model that I've built. It will not be well received. That I can tell you. And then there's an example in this experience, this lived experience that we've had with a customer, that was exactly it. It wasn't well received. IT said, well, we're doing quarterly updates. We've got security patches. We have hardware that we need to replace. We just don't have capability or capacity to deal with this at the moment. Now, what does the DVA do in this instance, and how do they resolve this issue? So firstly, they align priorities, right? So the DVA focuses to ensure that IT business and data is aware, and that there's transparency around the project that's being worked on, right? So if this is a strategic project, then the IT and the business folk need to know what's happening. You can't, in isolation in the data function, build miraculous stuff and then take it back to the other functions and then just expect them, drop everything that you're doing, just take the stuff like my model is like 90% accurate. You need to use it. It's like, yeah, it's not really high on my list of priorities of things to do, because also the value bit is not there, right? So what the DVA does is they seek support from and mandate from the right levels of management or leadership, and to make sure that there's support for this initiative, number one. Number two is they make sure that value is linked to this initiative, right? So we're not just delivering a churn model for the sake of doing it. We clearly understand that we're delivering this. This is the expected outcome, and this is what needs to happen. They get the parties together. They orchestrate value. We'll touch on this a bit later, but it's these guys are not just project managers. You can still deliver something on time, on budget, in scope, and still not deliver value, right? So this is the bit where the DVA then comes in to fix it. So what do they then change in terms of this engagement? Well, firstly is there's adoption of how analytics is supposed to function. And it's not just stop at delivering that actionable insights, but also actually delivering and embedding the analytics that is required to drive the real business impact and value. And the biggest change is that there's now alignment around the criticality of the work being done in a strategic initiatives, rather than isolating the data function and expecting them to drive value on their own. Right? Data analytics on its own cannot deliver value. If you think you can, it's a harsh reality. It can't. And you can challenge me on this and we can have long debates, but it is impossible, right? It's like it's like an engine. You can have the best engine, but you can't say like this engine is extremely fast without putting it into a chassis and giving it wheels to run, right? Exactly. So it's the same context, as you need to embed it and entrench it into this value system in order for value to be realized. And with the DVA in this instance being brought in, they've ensured that analytics got embedded to the team and that they've been able to improve customer retention by over 15%, which they can now actively monitor and improve, which they couldn't have done before, right? So the DVA doesn't just close the gap of we're now actually using the analytics, but they're also improving the revenue and the customer retention rates and the revenue protection, by a significant margin that wasn't done before. Now, situation 3 is an interesting one. It's for the people that have the privilege of dealing with sales teams. Now, they're lovely people, they're interesting people, but they're very stuck in their ways, right? So it's going to be one of those areas where you're going to hear those dreaded words where it's going to be, we have always done it this way. And they're going to challenge you on that, right? So in this scenario that we dealt with from an analytics perspective is the organization felt is if they had better insights to focus on customer management and understanding the customer behavior, service delivery, where the customer is based at, what services are they consuming from the organization, what's the payment behavior, are they defaulting on payments, all sorts of interesting stuff. That if they use that and they give that to the account management teams, that they are now able to better manage the customer, right? So they can sort of prevent churn. They can move people from being detractors to being promoters. They can make sure that the service delivery is up to scratch. They can almost preempt bad service, but they can also preempt where there's opportunities to upsell, cross-sell, and increase revenue from customer accounts. Now, what went wrong in this instance is the insights was delivered. It was like everything was built. Again, how this plays out, a meeting gets scheduled. We need to build customer insights. Great. The team gets a brief. Maybe there's like 2 levels up that gives them the brief. So the actual salespeople are not involved in that conversation. They go away and they hammer this thing and they build it. Like it's amazing. Like it's extremely complex and it's got like all sorts of cluster stuff and bar charts and line graphs and what else, it's all the bells and whistles. And maybe even these days you have like these little fancy boxes on the side to say like, but why did my sales fail type thing? And it gives you the insights. So technically they've delivered everything that was supposed to deliver. They did it on time, on budget, in scope. Now, what was wrong is Insights has gone through this process of delivering. They've collected the data, master and reference data was corrected, but the account teams were never used, or the account teams never ended up using the insights that they were given to them because they still very much relied on emails and calls. Like if I need to know something about my customer, I will send them an email. Or I've got a direct line like where I can call someone and they can give me information, and I rely on that to maintain my customer relationship rather than actually using the insights that I have around the behavior the customer has with me. So they became very reluctant to adopt these insights to drive strategic customer management, and they stuck to their guns, saying, we have always done it this way. Right? So those are the scariest words, like those 7 words are the scariest words in the world of data analytics. Like we've always done it this way. Why should we do something else? All right. So this is now where the DVA comes in and provides a different lens, right? So what they do is they get it buy-in from what the teams actually need in order to drive that adoption. So they actually work with the teams to ensure that the right contracting and incentives are in place to ensure the adoption of the analytics delivered. Core focus here was the change management around analytics, not just building something in isolation and then throwing it over the fence and expecting people to use it. The entire approach was wrong as a data team developed this stuff without consulting and involving the actual people that were supposed to use it at the end of the day. So the DVA's function in this instance is bringing those people together, making sure that the right people are around the room, but also that contracting is done, is to say, but you can do these things. Now, what was really cool in this instance is what has changed since the DVA got involved. So by bringing in the account teams, they were able to provide inputs into what they actually expect and how the analytics would be useful to them. By contracting in the relevant teams, everyone was aligned on what was to be delivered, and that usage will be tracked to ensure adoption is baked into the process rather than just delivering the insights and walking away and then placing blame on the account teams when they don't use the insights. I've been in so many of those conversations, like we've built the analytics, they're not using it, right? So back to my previous point of if we need to put usage metrics in place, then we're missing the point. So what they've done is, in this instance, they've actually tracked the usage, but they've tracked the usage in a meaningful way because they looked at who's using it and what's the performance of those accounts versus the people that's not using it and the performance in their accounts. And they were actually using that statistics to go back to the teams to say, do you realize that the people that's actually using these insights to manage their customers are outperforming you by more than 40%?
Beautiful.
Right? It means they almost like half the amount more productive than what you are just by leveraging the insights. They still do calls, they still do emails, but understanding what's happening in the world of the customer, they've got this clear view. Now, you obviously what the DVA has done here is they've instilled measurable value that can be leveraged to improve and optimize the impact over time. They don't just drive the value by providing the people these things, and they can measure it because they see the current impact, but they can also drive the value of adoption by consistently communicating back is like these people are using it and look at what they're achieving through using these platforms. So those are our three scenarios for the day, Mags. I think it's hopefully some people that's listening today or that's watching this video can relate to some of these things where it's like small things that we're missing, but the DVA really then becomes the glue that holds these things together. And over the coming weeks, we'll obviously unpack this in a bit more. But that being said, it's time for our weekly reality check. Somebody needs to keep us honest. Somebody needs to make sure that we're not smoking our socks. And I'm going to hand back to Max to give us our reality check of the week.
Yeah, what stands out for me regarding what you said, John, is that growth comes from change, and data and analytics and itself investing in that doesn't make any sense if you don't enable change through that, and change in behavior. And the change is not always very nice. It can be quite tedious and the DVA actually supports that function of helping people to change and being that almost like the mothership, although not all DVAs are female. I think it's important to understand that that's the safety net and the person that actually enables the change and making sure things happen there. So definitely, I think, to be honest, my biggest reality check here today has been just to realize change needs to happen. It doesn't help we invest in everything if change doesn't happen and value comes out of that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's that big mind shift of, and it's sort of detriment of the world is where the data people came up with this word or these words called being data driven. Because they were convinced if we can convince the world to be data driven, people will take us seriously. Unfortunately, we live in a reality where we need to shift from being data driven to being value driven, because everybody can relate back to value, but not everybody can relate back to data. Unfortunately, we are a special bunch of people, the data folk. We are born into this. We love it. It gives us passion, but unfortunately, the world around us does not operate on the context of data. Data doesn't have any intrinsic value in the context of actual business value if you can't relate it back to either revenue gains, cost reduction, those type of things. So the challenge this week is, for those listeners, is identify where your initiatives are the weakest, right? So where do you need clarity around the value? So whatever you're doing, if you're building a dashboard, building a model, setting up a data platform, bringing in a new data pipeline, question it. Why am I doing this? What's the value that the business will get out of this? What is that delivery alignment look like? So, am I convinced that if I'm delivering this, that the next person in the value chain will actually be able to pick this up and run with it? Am I so closely connected to my users and the people that is expected to get the value out of it that they know about this? And just think about practically what you're delivering now, what you're busy with, what's going to be the adoption of this once you're done with it? And secondly is, what is the measurement you're putting in place to make sure that it does get adopted, but also what value comes out of it? Now, whether you're starting out with a new project and you need to start thinking about planning for these things, or you're busy with something at the moment, is look at those initiatives, identify value clarity, delivery alignment, focus on adoption and what that measurement looks like. Now, the exciting thing is over the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing a lot of deep dives into the role of the DVA, what it looks like, what methodologies that they're using. And next week is the fun one, because we're looking at what a DVA actually does. Right. So we've heard them doing some things and we've sort of shared some stories around the impact of the DVA. But next week, we're going to give you insight to behind the scenes. What does a DVA actually do? What does a weekly cadence for them look like? And then we'll give you the scoop on how the DVA operates in practice. Awesome. Thank you for tuning in today and for listening. Hopefully we see you guys next week. Like we mentioned, it's an eight episode or an 8-part series. This is part 2. If you haven't caught part 1 yet, please go and check it out on YouTube. Listen to this one and be sure to watch out for the next one that will be following in the next couple of days. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.